This video is from my series that walks you through how to build a career in film and television production. In this discussion, I'm talking to a client about how we use and track the trades to build an analog database of shows, executives, and producers in production. All right, so reading resources. So one of the things we do on a regular basis in running our business is we plow through the trades, which I'm sure you've seen: Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, Variety, Entertainment Weekly, and I'll go over all these in just a second. But what we do is we plow through them and we track them. We track what's going on. The trades tell us what's coming. They tell us what shifts are happening in the industry and what trends are happening as far as money goes. We every day, a producer, a writer, a director, and to some extent actors, but to a much lesser extent, and definitely not so much crew, but writers and directors and producers are constantly sifting through the trades, looking for material and changes and things that are ideas that are happening, that are coming up, right? And so we build a database around these ideas, and we just take a look at who's doing what, and how do we use that as to be able to prospect for the future of building our career. What we're looking at are deals, business, ratings, viewers, followers, box office. And when I say ratings and views and followers, those are essentially the same thing. So the ratings existed from Nielsen, and that was pretty much the biggest provider, and it went on for a half century. And they're still relevant, and they still sell, and the networks use them. But because so much of the way industry has changed, especially in the streaming space, we don't have any idea how well projects are doing. There's just no way to get a sense of it, because they just don't share that data. So we plow through the ratings and the viewers and the followers to try to get a sense of, are these projects working, and will the executives on the other end of it decide to greenlight the next idea that made money based on this particular thing that's happening right now, right? That's where we follow box office. That's why we look at deals. That's why we follow the business. The trades are full of gossip. They're full of reviews. They're full of nonsense that we just ignore. We pass through it, and we just sort of, skip past whatever is going on. And that's an important distinction that I think we need to make when looking at what to follow. Now, remember, this is an analog method to track executives, projects, and companies. The Variety Database, IMDb Pro, and Studio Systems are all subscription services that do a much better job, but they cost anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000 a year for a single license. This is an analog, inexpensive way of collecting the data that we need to engage in the industry. I want to go over and cover what the resources are that we pay attention to, and they are Deadline, which sort of, before Hollywood Reporter, before Deadline, Hollywood Reporter and Variety were both papers that we got every day. They were delivered to our door. They were delivered to the studio or wherever you worked. And then Deadline came along and basically blew all that up. And those monopolies, or really duopolies, because there were only two of them. But anyway, the monopolies that Hollywood Reporter and Variety had on the trades was taken over by Deadline. And I forget the woman's name that created it, but she essentially had done a better job of scooping Hollywood Reporter and Variety and getting it out instantaneously and using the web. It's probably been 10 years since she did that. The other papers we look at are the Reporter and Variety, which I mentioned before. I like to look at Entertainment Weekly, and I suggest you get a subscription to it. It's like $10 a year, I think, maybe 20. But you get I think there's 50 issues they put out every year. So you basically get it every week. You can get it online. I like to get the paper version just because I like to have it, and I just sit and read it when I'm eating dinner or whatever. You understand that the Entertainment Weekly is retail. It's what the wider world sees about the industry. And it's all manicured and curated by the publicity machine that runs actors, studios, directors, and to some extent writers. So when you're looking at it, you have to understand it's just retail, and everything you're seeing in there is the material that has happened a year and a half or 2 years ago. It features even longer, but in television, it was at least a year ago when that these ideas were greenlit, and then they show up in Entertainment Weekly. But what it does is it gives us a sense of what the what's the term I would use for describing the the reviewers? It tells us what's percolated up from the reviewers who are making decisions about what they think is good and what they think isn't good, right? So if you see something a year ago that came up through the trades, it's like, oh, this is going into production. And then a year and a half later, it shows up in Entertainment Weekly, or a year later, and they're giving it 5 stars. And they think it's amazing. It's going to be the next thing since, since sliced bread. That's an important metric to follow. And that's how I use Entertainment Weekly, is as a way of just proofing what the industry is putting out there, what the reviewers and the wider world sees as something that will work or has already worked. So it's sort of the end result of whether or not you're going to be able to identify what will be successful and what won't. And the truth is, no one's ever able to tell what will be successful. Even the reviewers, stuff comes out of the woodwork and it's like, oh my God, that was successful. That made money. I mean, I thought Glee was going to crater. I was like, oh, stupid a fucking idea. Boy, was I wrong. And by the way, that there's a pattern in my life. Whatever I like will not do business. It'll be moderately okay. Whatever I hate will sell more tickets than you could fucking count. And that's fine. I mean, I know my place, and I'm not the guy who's going to be the executive picking shows, right? And I realized that a long time ago. And then there's other places to find relevant information about your vertical and what you're currently working on. For me, and this will be different for you and what you're doing. So I'm not going to go over all of them here, but you should keep your eyes peeled for what's relevant and what makes sense to you. For me, they're more about production. They're more about the festivals. It's more kind of what's coming in the future as far as change in our industry. Technology is dramatically changing our business. And everybody talks all the time about how entertainment's at the tip of the spear. It's, always the people who are taking on the new ideas and looking for new things and interesting, whatever subjects to talk about. That's largely not true, except in some creative ideas or concepts, but almost nowhere else in the industry. So they're slow to make change, but it still is a business that is resistant to change. And trying to get change made in this business is like pushing a boulder up a hill. So I pay attention to some of the sort of leading edge stuff. For example, film and digital kind of ran side by side for a long time. In fact, some filmmakers don't want film to go away. They convince the studios to plow $100 million over 5 or 6 studios over the next 10 years to make sure that Kodak and or Fuji doesn't go out of business and doesn't ever stop making film. And they said, yes, we'll buy film and we're going to make our movies on film. So don't go away. And that happened 5 or 6 years ago. But about 20 years ago, digital was becoming the standard. And the film people were like, it's never going to, no one's ever going to adopt it. Look at it, it looks like shit. We hate it. It doesn't meet the production values. But then Coppola came out and said, he did a movie in Paris, he was shot in France. And he shot on, not the Sony camera, but it wasn't a Panasonic either. It might've been an Arri camera. It doesn't matter. He came out after that movie was made and said, I'll never go back to film again. This is the greatest thing I've ever encountered. The point I'm making here is that it takes a huge name for everybody to go, what? Oh, wait, we should pay attention to that. And then everybody started to pay attention to that. That's where the other reading resources come in, and I'm always looking for them because I found that article just buried in some small post-production magazine that nobody else was talking about except this one place. The magazine happens to be out of business. It was called Post Studio or something. But anyway, this is in 2003 or 4. I was finishing a Benji movie in a studio in one of the post facilities, and I happened to read the article and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And we had just finished the movie on digital using a Sony camera. And the only reason we did is because we had to shoot 50 days with a dog, and we couldn't afford to shoot film. We just had to shoot digital because, tapes were $100. All the processing was a lot more. So anyway, point is, look at other resources and look at it for the idea of change happening in our business. Okay, that's the trades. We read them every day and we track what's going on. You look at the show's producers, writers, executives, etc. What you track will vary depending on your path and your vertical, but the base level we want to look at are the show's producers, production company, executives, and the creatives. Now we'll show an example of how to pull this data using today's reporter. So the reporter. So when I get the reporter, I'm just clipping through these articles and I'm just reading the headlines. And I go back and I just go to what's on the front page first, and then I'll go look at business, and then I'll go backwards through TV sometimes, and then movies and tech. And what I'm looking for is business, right? Behind Netflix's upheaval, departures, anxiety, and another reorganization. I might take a look at this and see what's going on, just because they're the biggest player in town, and see who's going to be gone and who's going to stay. And looking specifically at Netflix, and assuming you only have one connection, if your contact goes away, or their boss goes away, or both of them go away, your connection to the industry is over, right? So you have to, it's almost like you have to start over again. And when the bloodbath happens at one place, it ripples through town. If Netflix gets rid of this person and hires a person from Disney Plus, and then Warner Brothers hires the person who was at Netflix, and then Disney hires the guy that was at Warner Brothers, or they find someone new, which almost never happens. You get a studio job, you keep a studio job, and you either retire or you drop dead. That's how studio jobs are replaced. So when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, okay, Netflix is having changes. Does my development executive have a worry of going away? And that's how we look at these things as far as the corporate reporting of news. So when the bloodbath happens in one place, there's a shift in town, and it happens about every 5 years. And when it happens, everybody's chair shifts and we're moving on to the next. We're the pillars of something new. Steve McQueen, blah, blah, blah. Noise, right? Johnny Depp, noise. Hollywood races to November 3rd, more noise. Chelsea Handler grows up, more noise. Don't care. And then I'm looking at the stuff on the left, and I'm looking for things that are not about personalities necessarily. I want to see what's going on in the business, right? Is NFL, if you're in the sports space or live television, these stories matter, right? Is this going to change? Is my business going to disappear? So this is how I'm looking at the trades every day to see what's going on. AT&T complete sale of Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, whatever. Who cares? It doesn't really affect me unless I'm connected to these businesses and I have an executive there somewhere. And I'm going to pick up the phone and say, hey, man, what the fuck's going on? Are you getting promoted? Are you moving to the U.S.? That kind of thing.
Right.
And by the way, as soon as this hits the trades, everybody else is going to be on that person's desk trying to figure out whether or not they're going to lose their contact. So don't be surprised if it takes a day or two to get back, or if ever at all. More Netflix. AMC theaters sell stock to raise money. Are these guys going to be around? Probably not. Are they going to disappear? No. Are we going to see 25% of the number of screens we have? We're going to see 75% of the screens that are currently out there. Are they going to go away in the next 5 years? Probably. That's my guess. AMC, Cinemark, and the other big circuit, which is eluding me at the moment, they will probably be acquired by a Netflix or an Amazon, both of which have more money than sense, to buy these distressed assets out of bankruptcy. That's my guess is what's going to happen with these guys. But that's what I'm looking for. It's probably not related to what you're interested in doing, but I'm just using it as an example of how I read the trades and making it specific to my business and what I track. I follow this stuff pretty regularly, and I click through it on a daily basis just to see. So the trades are broken down into a certain kind of content comes on Monday through Friday. So usually the development slates that are coming up and the new content or the new material that's being put into development, that usually comes on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Fridays is review day. Thursday was pretty much business day. And Monday was basically box office and ratings day. And everything pretty much centered around those ideas. It's less structured now because of the internet, and you can basically publish whatever you want, whenever you want. You're not constrained by 45 pages of paper. So anyway, so I don't know. The point I'm making is I'm not sure we'll see much going on Monday, but here's a good example. Danny Trejo is a star in a cartel thriller, American Sicario. That's a thing I would put on my hit list because he's early on, right? He's not a late actor being added to this. this project is in the early stages of packaging, or maybe it just got greenlit. So if I were a director or a writer or a producer or crew saying to myself, oh, what's this American Sicario? Where's it shooting? Who's on it? Who's the producer? Where's it being produced? What vanity company or what production company under what banner is going to make this show? And that's how I would put this in my database as something to follow. And I put them in chronological order. I put them in an Excel spreadsheet, and I just make notes so that I can go back and I can do a find, or Google Docs or Google Sheets is another place you can do it, where you can do a find on what was that show that Danny Trejo was in and who's doing it. So I just start collecting information about it, right? This is a good example. I'll go in and I'll read the article, and I'm going to go pick up the things that are interesting to me, right? As far as who is going to be writing it and who's going to be producing it. So I I clicked into the article, and then I'm clicking through and I'm just reading through these paragraphs, and I see veteran film producer Reha Collins. And I don't know who that is. It's not someone I'm friends with, but if you are, or you know an assistant there, or you know a creative executive or someone there, I just pick up the phone for whoever you know that's connected to this particular director. I would pick up the phone and call them. And I'm scanning through here to figure out what companies are making it. It will be produced by GFG Entertainment with Ross Campbell and all these other names as lead producers. So if you know any of these people, or you know someone at GFG Entertainment, that would be my first the first trigger I put in my database and my list. And if I don't know someone at GFG, or I don't know any of these people, I would just start calling around, talking to the people I do know in town, and say, hey, do you know Ross Campbell? Do you know anybody on this show that Reha Collins is going to be making? It just got greenlit. That's the kind of connection that we're trying to make around town. That's the job, right? Ultimately, we're trying to get to a place where we're able to make connections in the industry and use the trades to gather intelligence about what's coming in the future, to see what fits with our vertical and our goal job. This is an overhead view of how I read the trades and how I was taught to read the trades by a producer 25 years ago. So much has changed in the last 25 years. It's no longer analog. There's plenty of data available online. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to subscribe to a paper. But this is important work that I use to keep track of what's going on in the industry. As with any entrepreneur, you're prospecting for how to move your career forward. It starts with one person that you've made a connection with, and we're going to show you how to make that connection and expand it out to other people so that your network is wide and strong. We're building a network so that when you need to find a job, you can reach into your database and connect some dots, make a few calls, and be on the hunt for the next job or project that will move your career forward. And that's it. That's how I read the trades, and that's how I use them to gain intelligence about the industry in which I'm working and the people who I want to target.